Hey guys, I've been getting a lot of messages lately asking, Jake, where are you getting your shirts from? Hey guys, you've probably noticed that I have a brand new skin routine, and it's working out great. I've been getting tons of messages about it. Hey guys, a lot of you all have been sending me messages lately asking, Jake, how do you stay so cool? Just kidding. Nobody asks me that. Nobody sends me messages asking that kind of stuff, but it's 2021 on the internet, and I feel like that's what you're supposed to start videos with. How's it going, everybody? Jake Ruddle here with Youtini.com, and today we are talking a little bit more about Canon comics. Specifically, we're going to be talking about what goes on between Episode 4, A New Hope, and Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. There's a lot of things that are going on in Star Wars at that time. We get a lot of questions answered, and we get a lot of new storylines that kind of start up. So we're going to be checking that out today, talking about all of those awesome things, and then I'll be happy to answer any of your all's questions if you have anything along those lines. Before we get this video started, I want to remind you guys that there are a ton of new Star Wars books coming out this year, and the best way to experience those books in your ear is through Audible. All the information that you need is on our affiliate links through Youtini.com, so be sure you check it out. The most recent release is Thrawn Ascendancy Greater Good, the second book in a all-new Thrawn trilogy. The third book is going to be out this fall. While we are talking about comics today, and you cannot listen to comics through Audible, it's a great way to switch back and forth between the Star Wars content that we know that you guys love. So let's talk about the comics. There is a lot to say. I'm not going to go too far down the rabbit hole of what the comics are and what they cover, because we have a couple other videos that we will throw in the description below that's going to give you everything you need to know. The Canon comics, the best comics to start with, that kind of stuff. If you don't know where to go, that's where you should probably start, because it's going to be a good way for you to figure out where you want to be. Now, for those of you who are watching this video because you are thinking about starting up some of the comic runs that fill in the gap between Episode 4 and Episode 5, this is going to be the video for you. In short, there is a ton of content. Some of it you might be familiar with. Some of it you might not be familiar with. That's what we're here to explain today. The most prominent run that you're going to want to familiarize yourself with as far as what goes on in between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back is the Star Wars run. Skywalker Strikes is what kicks that run off. This is going to be the running series that covers everything that Han and Luke and Leia were up to between the events of A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. What's really awesome about this series, this new run, because this is the run that Disney kind of started whenever they took over Lucasfilm back in 2015, is how we start to see more tie-ins to the movies. Remember this guy, General Draven from Rogue One? Well, sometimes people ask, like, where were some of these guys in the original trilogy? Why weren't they in the original trilogy if they were so important in Rogue One? We find out what happens to him. What about this guy? General Jen Dodonna. He was a huge character in Star Wars Rebels. We saw him kind of explaining what was going to happen during the destruction of the Death Star in A New Hope, and then we never see him again. We show up in The Empire Strikes Back and we got General Rieekan, and it's like, well, what happened to General Dodonna? We find out what happens to him. We pick up on a couple of other things as far as how the Rebels start to get their Mon Calamari fleet, how they build that fleet. We get some background into how Darth Vader starts to lead the Imperial Death Squadron, where he picks up his Superstar Destroyer, the Executor. We also get to see another Superstar Destroyer, the Annihilator. And remember this guy, Cassio Tag? We find out that he actually did not die on the Death Star with Grand Moff Tarkin and the rest of the gang. He made it off, and he has a role to play in kind of proving Darth Vader's worth. I guess we can put it that way. Speaking of Darth Vader, there is a little bit of a crossover because Darth Vader gets his own run during this time. It's what's normally referred to as the original Darth Vader comic run. If you've watched any of our other videos or kept up with it, you probably are familiar with the fact that Darth Vader has, I think he's in his third run right now of things that are happening in his life. But we have about a 25-issue run of Darth Vader that takes place concurrently with the Star Wars run. Star Wars eventually continues on through 75 issues, while Darth Vader starts to transition into the Dr. Aphra runs. But again, we get some of these gaps filled out. We meet some of these new characters, particularly if you have been paying attention to some of the more recent releases from the Star Wars universe. The Dr. Aphra audio drama, which you can now pick up the script for if you want to follow along with that. We meet characters like Son of Staros. We also get to see that Luke maybe had some run-ins with Dr. Aphra along the way. We could really go spend an entire video just putting together the web of all the characters, but between Star Wars, Darth Vader, Dr. Aphra, you have a pretty solid storyline that you can read that is going to keep you up to date in the 3 years that take place between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. It's really kind of interesting because towards the end of the Star Wars run, and even seeing some of the different one-offs that Dr. Aphra and Darth Vader gave us, we get to find things out like how they decided on Hoth, what it was like in the early days of Hoth, and how they kind of established Echo Base. It fills in a lot of the gaps, and like I said, we even, in some of these one-off comics that start to kind of wrap up the series before The Empire Strikes Back, we maybe even see some special appearances by the parents of maybe someone who plays a big role in the sequel trilogy. It's all beginning to tie together. Gotta have faith. It's all gonna make sense. Nothing in Star Wars made sense originally. Nobody knows what was going on, and it all made sense. It's all part of the game. In addition to the longer runs, Dr. Aphra, Darth Vader, Star Wars, we do have what we refer to as graphic novels for some of our main characters. Han Solo has his own run that it is not specifically placed, but it's pretty well understood throughout any canon timeline that you look at that this takes place shortly after the events of A New Hope because of his interactions with Leia and what she's up to. But we see Han Solo get his little 6-issue run. Princess Leia actually has her own little run of events that take place right after A New Hope, and we see that she actually travels to Naboo, and maybe there's going to be even a little bit of haunting by a former queen who Leia may or may not feel some strong connection to. There's a lot of places to start, and if you want to get yourself caught up in what exactly was happening with our heroes between the events of A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, you really want to check out that Star Wars run. The Darth Vader run is a close second. A lot of people who are hardcore studiers of The Empire Strikes Back will notice that early in the movie, Darth Vader refers to Luke Skywalker by name before they ever actually meet. And people sometimes will ask the question, well, how does Darth Vader know who Luke Skywalker is? And some people kind of saw that for the longest time as like a goof or an oversight by George Lucas, that he hadn't really thought that through yet. But we find out when and where and how Darth Vader learns Luke Skywalker's name and what that's going to mean in the grand scheme of things, and what Darth Vader's up to in that time before we get this big reveal in Empire Strikes Back. Tons of things to check out. In addition to the Marvel comic runs, we also have the IDW Star Wars Adventure runs, which are targeted a little bit more to a younger audience, but they still have some really good stories. Star Wars Adventures Volume 2, The Unexpected Detour, covers a story called Trouble at Tabrim, which is when Luke and Leia go on their first diplomatic mission after the events of A New Hope. Some of these stories are essentially little one-off stories. They don't fall as nicely into the canon timeline as some of the other stories that have direct tie-ins to the movies, direct tie-ins to the characters we see on the screen, but they're still fun little stories. And even though the Star Wars Adventure runs are targeted towards a younger audience, if you enjoy the comics and if you enjoy Star Wars, you can't go wrong with what you have on the page here. What's really awesome about this time period in the Star Wars universe, and as far as Star Wars publishing goes, it's a pretty cut and dry story at this point. They have finished a lot of these comic runs. There are still stories that take place, and there are still stories that are popping up between the events of A New Hope in The Empire Strikes Back, but you've got a bunch of cut and dry beginning and end stories here. What's really awesome, if you are interested in what went on between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, those stories are going on right now. Those are being published as we speak, kind of in the same way that these stories were being published a couple years ago. The tough part about the post-Empire Strikes Back stories is you gotta wait every couple weeks for a new issue to be released, and then what you gotta do is sit and wait for the next one to come out. And that's a lot of waiting. But with the Star Wars, Skywalker Strikes, Darth Vader, all of these different runs, you get the stories, you can move on to the next one. A lot of these are accessible on things like Prime Unlimited or Amazon Kindle Unlimited. So you have the option to pick up some of these comics, some of these runs relatively cheaply if you already have one of those subscriptions. So I highly recommend checking that out. There's a ton of things we could talk about with comics. There's a ton of stuff going on in the web of stories that go on here. But Dr. Aphra, Darth Vader, Star Wars, check out Han Solo, check out Princess Leia. You got a ton of things to pick from. As far as everything else goes in the Youtini universe, we have tons of things going on. You can check out the Living Force podcast every Monday evening. We go live on Twitch. You can also subscribe anywhere that you pick up your podcast subscriptions, whether you're an Apple person, Android person, you can listen to Youtini. Be sure to head on over to the website where you can check out all of our different podcasts and different groups that you can become part of, where you can be part of a Star Wars community that is positive and it is exciting, and it is something that that you will find a home in very quickly. Our Discord is another great way to get involved with the people on the Youtini staff and with other people in the Star Wars community. We have a very active Discord. I know that you guys are going to love it. There's so many different rooms to check out and so many different questions to get answered, so many thoughts to put out there. Go to the website, check out all the stuff we have. What's great is that we've got so many things, it's hard for me to even think about which one I want to plug right now. But Youtini.com, it's got everything that you need. I will see you guys on the next video. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments and I will pop in there, try and get them answered for you as soon as possible. Leave a comment on what your favorite Star Wars comic is and I will be sure to try and respond and let you guys know why I like that one or why I don't like that one. I can be kind of picky sometimes. Either way, we want to get involved with you guys. I will see you all in the next video. Stay safe and remember, the Force will be with you always.